Our final speaker for this session is Dr. Paul Heithersay. Paul will be very well known to most in the audience, but for those of you from out of the state, or perhaps those of you early in your careers, Paul is the Chief Exec of the Department for Energy and Mining and has had a significant influence on the direction and development of the resources sector in this state over the past 22 years. The achievements Paul has delivered during this time in the state are way too many to list here, but to pick off a few, transforming South Australia's mining landscape and turning around perceptions of the state's prospectivity of mining, launching the PACE program, I believe a national first at the time, overseeing, you'll hear a common number here, a tenfold increase in mineral exploration expenditure to the present day levels in excess of 300 million. Quadrupling of mineral royalties to in excess of 400 million, and the gross value of mineral production increasing from around $1 billion at the time to in excess of $10 billion today. For those not aware, Paul will be stepping down from his role as the Chief Executive in early December, and today we'll be providing some reflections and insights on his time with the department. Please join me in welcoming Paul.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for that. Thanks to Kathy for that talk. Every time we hear a talk from Kathy, it's like, how amazing is this ore body? I mean, it just floors me every time a new bit of data, and it just gets better and better and better. I just want to reflect on a few things. I sort of felt that I really wanted to sort of talk about what's next, what's coming next, and I had a look at the website for the conference, and there I was saying similar things back in 2003. My father used to challenge me about that, saying that you're saying the same talk over and over again because it's all about what's going to happen. It's just coming over the hill, or we're just around the corner. But I think the metrics now that we can talk about, which are up there, which Mark sort of alluded to just then. But there has been a 10x growth in just about everything that matters in South Australia. And why? Because we've got the geologies here. The geology is the right geology. That's what it really comes down to. And the better we understand it, the more we're going to find. And I don't think that's any surprise to anybody in this room. We need the investment. The investment is... we hit a peak in, back in the day of about 400 or 500 million. We're up around 300 million now. And a lot of that is due to BHP too, of course, who have been steadfastly exploring in South Australia for a long time. And people say, well, okay, your exploration figures are up because BHP are doing a drill out. Well, that's actually the way it's supposed to work, that people explore, they find things, they can expend the money on drilling out the ore body to a mineable stage. So that's exactly what you want. And I think the notion of $10 billion of production is really quite astounding. And the mineral sector accounts for 42% of South Australia's exports. So it's definitely here to stay. For the first 20 years, these are the faces that you were well and truly used to. Ted Tyne, who was here yesterday, the late great Barry Goldstein, with the worst jokes in human history, and Alex Blood, and all of those people really added a lot of value to the department with innovation and ideas that really put us in good shape. We've just gone through a big restructure over the last 2 years. So this is the new crew, except the one on the left-hand side will be disappearing fairly shortly. But Vince, Rebecca, Ben, and Nick are the new regime. And I have to say that since the restructures happened, which we did largely because we could see that with the energy transition, mining, energy, petroleum, we're all sort of becoming merged in one way or the other, and you really needed a different structure to handle what was coming. And from my perspective, it's worked fairly well. I want to talk a little bit about policy here, which is not. I wasn't expecting to do this. I'd rather talk about cross sections and geology. But I think one thing that South Australia has done is led in innovation in policy and legislation. Now, I've got the Roxby Downs Indenture Ratification Act 1982, and this is the 2011 version. So I had the privilege in 2011-12 to lead a thing called the Olympic Dam Task Force, and our task was to get an indenture for the open pit and an EIS done, and we had about a year to do it, and we managed to do it. Now, as the market changed, the world changed, and it didn't go ahead, but the reality is that this document has still got life in it, and it led to a discussion around the Northern Water project, which is now live. But early on in the discussion was, well, we've done the work to have a permit for a desal plant in this particular piece of work. Let's use that and then develop the story for the Northern Water system. So indirectly, this piece of work has led to potentially a $5 billion investment by the government to put water into the North and South Australia. But following on from that, using the sort of, okay, if you've got a good policy background or a good piece of legislation, use it again. We did exactly that with the Hydrogen Renewable Energy Act, which was prosecuted earlier this year. And really what we did was we needed something to bring together all the elements that were being used for the sort of gigawatt scale renewable energy projects and hydrogen, bring them all under one umbrella. And we used the Petroleum Act. So we actually sort of took the best bits of the Petroleum Act, improved them, and now we've got an HRE Act which sort of brought about 10 bits of legislation into one. Fundamentally, the big improvement, I think, on this particular round was we involved I think we had 20 of the 23 Aboriginal nations in the room discussing it, and we talked about it with them before we actually even got to Cabinet. We've had three big meetings with those groups ever since then, and they've sort of ratified the process as we've gone along, which means that this particular act means that the Aboriginal groups they're in on the ground floor, the pastoralists are in on the ground floor, and so we can present a piece of legislation to overseas investors where a lot of the risk has already been taken out. And again, I think we can repeat that same logic in any number of things. For example, we're seeing a lot more interest in big data centres, and to sort of it's a slight adjustment of this thing would allow big renewable energy, big green energy facilitation and data farms would be an easy thing to do. So that's something to recommend. And this state and the successive governments have done this pretty well. Of course, the PACE story, I need to write a book about this one day, but the history of this was one of the first, well, it was actually, again, a refresh of an idea that happened in New South Wales where they subsidised drilling in New South Wales. It sort of ran its course, but then early in 2003, 2004, Robert de Crespigny, who was helping government at the stage, said, well, why don't you do that, what they did in New South Wales? So we refreshed it, added a few more things to it. It was meant to be a 3-year program. It ran for 15 years and then led to the ADI programs, and everywhere else around Australia sort of copied us, and we're very welcome that they did, because I think it actually led to some interesting new discoveries. And certainly in South Australia, it led directly to Carrapateena. So we were lucky that I think in the first year, Carrapateena bobbed along. Rudy Gomez, as you know, sort of put his superannuation in to match the government funding. First hole was a dud, second hole found Carrapateena, and the sort of rest is history. Prominent Hill was found before the PACE program got started, but in fact the PACE program helped subsidise the exploration for water. And so the company at the time probably spent about as much money exploring for the water source for Prominent Hill as they did for the discovery. So the government PACE funding really helped that along. And Jacinta Ambrosia sort of put this in here, not so much from tying it to PACE, but it was just showed what a good company can do. With willing partners, with a coalition of the willing is the way I pitch it, When the discoveries of Jacinta Ambrosia came along, and was in a regional reserve, the original thought was, we're dreaming, nobody's going to get a mine up in this particular area. But the company came in, they dealt with the local native title Aboriginal people very, very early on, employed a lot of them at a very early stage, put a lot of money into research about how do you rehabilitate mallee, which takes a hell of a long time to grow. And so this has been a very successful mine ever since, because they got things right at the beginning. They engaged with the locals, and I think it's one of the great success stories for South Australia, because even today, I think it's up around 25% Aboriginal employment on that particular mine, which is a great example to us all. So, I guess one thing that the government has managed to do is take the long-term view. We've been very lucky that we've had bipartisan support in this particular sector for a long time. We've posed strategies. We put the copper strategy up around 2016, I think, and with a target of 1 million tonnes of copper by 2030, and I reckon we'll go close to making that, which is extraordinary. The magnetite strategy we put up around the same time, and I told the story yesterday that we had a trip to the Premier's first trip to Japan. He was trying to spruik the hydrogen story over there. The first meeting he had was with Nippon Steel, and all they wanted to talk about was magnetite, and he was flummoxed a bit, but I managed to have the brochure in my back pocket and sort of slid it across the table, and bingo, we had a conversation, and it's now directly led to the prosperity plan, where magnetite copper is key parts of the story. Northern Water, as I mentioned, it started out from a notion that we already had the permitting done for it. Why couldn't we do it now? It's changed significantly since then, but it's a $5 billion plus exercise which will bring water from the bottom of Eyre Peninsula all the way up to the Olympic Dam. And this map is just a map showing all the prospects and projects that are sort of will be influenced by this particular piece of investment. It really is going to be a game changer for South Australia, as it was for the Yilgarn, as gas was for Queensland. So we look forward to working on that. Hopefully, I'm in my role. Whilst I'm leaving the chief executive's role, I'm going to be consulting back to the government, primarily working on this to try and help it along the line. And finally, I just thought I'd just, as you get to the end of these sorts of things, you think about all the issues that you've come across, the problems that you've solved, and really the only way it works is if you've got a sort of coalition of the willing. So I thought I'd just do a word cloud of people that I think have been pretty significant. There's a lot more than this, but you can see Ted, Wolfgang Price, Steve Hill, who's in GA now, Anthony Reid, who's floating around here, who's our chief geologist, Dom Calandro, who was our lead geophysicist when I first turned up, Alex Blood, who had a big impact in a lot of the innovation we've seen, Eleanor Alexander from on the petroleum side. So you can see the names. I think they'll be familiar to most of you in here. And it's been a great pleasure and a great privilege to be part of the Mines and Energy Department for a long time. Very proud of what we've collectively managed to achieve. So thank you very much.